Can you make a star block without using any half square triangles? I'm going to show you how. Hi, it's Fran Morgan with Fabric Café. Today, we're going to be making a quilt out of our brand new book, Quick Christmas 3-Yard Quilts. Now, this book has 8 new patterns that are all holiday themes, and we're going to be stepping out exactly how to make one, so let's go check out the quilt. Now, this is our Yuletide pattern, and I really love this new pattern here. There's a couple of things about it that are just fantastic. One, I love how we've taken a traditional Christmas fabric, which is very near and dear to my heart, but we've put it kind of with a modern spin, which I love. Now we have our half square triangles as our alternate block and our star as the main block. Now this star is very cool. There are no half square triangles in this star. Super easy to make. We're going to show you everything on how to do that. Now the alternate block, as I mentioned before, is our half square triangle. It's a big half square triangle, so these are super easy to do. And I think when you combine the two of these and you make this like strip of color going diagonally on the surface of the quilt, it's amazing. It has such a kind of updated, modern, but still family and traditional feel. Let's go through our entire supply list. Now we have put this up on the screen for you, so I would recommend hitting pause just for a moment to jot everything down. So the first thing we're gonna do is make the labels for all of our cuts. So I'm gonna grab my book here, my Quick Christmas book. I'm gonna open up to the pattern and I'm gonna refer to the box here that is separated, that is our cutting instructions. And I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna do all of the cards and the labels for my cuts from Fabric 1, from Fabric 2, from Fabric 3. So I'm gonna start with my Fabric 1 and I'm gonna look at the very first cut. And these are for Unit A. So what I'm gonna do is write on here that this cut is for Unit A assembly. So I'll set this one aside and I'm gonna do the second cut. So we are still in our Fabric 1, and the next cut is for our half square triangles. The next one is Border 1. And we're going to continue this process until we have all of our labels made and before we cut. Okay, we have all of our labels made and we're ready to start cutting. Got my fabric laid out, my ruler here, my bags are at the ready. The first thing I'm going to do is to consult my pattern to make sure I'm cutting the right sizes. Whenever I make my first cut, that first cut is cut a little bit bigger than what it calls for, and I square it up afterwards. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line this up and get it just so. I'm gonna make my first cut, and then I'm gonna turn just this strip around and I'm gonna square up that raw edge. That way I know that it's gonna be a nice square edge and I have the exact perfect measurement. But I'm gonna go ahead and show you the next step of this, because what we're gonna do is take these strips and we're gonna cut them into rectangles. So I'm just gonna fold this back and I'm gonna position this, and I'm gonna switch this out and not use the long ruler and use my little one because it's a little bit smaller cut. Alrighty, I'm gonna line this up. And once again, even in this case, I'm gonna do the first cut and then I'm gonna turn it and square it up and then make that cut. So we've got our first little piece from our first cut, and then I'm gonna continue and to cut the rest of these. Now also notice that I am cutting 2 at once because I kept the fabric folded with the selvages together, so that kind of helps speed up the process. Now I'm gonna continue cutting these until I get the number that the pattern requires, and then we will go to our next cut. Okay, so it looks like they're a little bit wider than my ruler, this next cut, so I'm gonna grab my bigger square and I'm gonna cut my entire strip the size that it says. And just very carefully, if you notice, I never raise my rotary cutter. I keep it very still so that I'm sure that I don't have any notch in my cut. So there we have that nice wide piece that we have cut. So I'm gonna turn this and I am going to cut the first square that is required. I am going to start cutting the rest of this strip for my Unit A assembly. And of course, I will be putting these all in my bags with their labels, so I'm sure not to get anything confused. Okay, for this second cut, I cut one strip that was really wide, and from that strip, I was able to get the 2 squares that I needed, as well as the 4 strips that it calls for. Now I'm going to cut these smaller strips into rectangles. Now, as I cut these, I just want to mention that I'm going to continue this process, finish my fabric number 1 cuts, and then continue in the same process for my fabric number 2 and my fabric number 3. Now it's time to start building our very first unit. So step 1 on our pattern is going to tell us to work on our Unit A assembly. So I'm going to grab my bag here that is labeled perfectly Unit A assembly. So I know that these are the right squares. I'm going to pull out the rest that I have here. And I'm going to double check because we need to be drawing on the wrong side. I'm going to use a water-soluble marker as well as just a smaller ruler to use as a straight edge. Okay, so it's telling me to mark corner to corner on the wrong side. I always start marking in the center and go to the edge. Mark to the center, go to the edge. I have found that whenever I do that, it keeps my corners from poking in. So if I start on the end, sometimes the fabric wants to shift just a little bit. But if I always start in the middle and mark out and then out to the edge, it keeps it nice and flat. Now I'm going to keep on marking these, and once I have them all marked, because I like to do it all in one step, then I'm going to go to the sewing machine. We marked all of our fabric number 2 on the wrong side, and I'm just going to consult my pattern here. We're going to be using our focus fabric rectangles that we have cut, and we are going to place our number 2 and our focus fabric, of course, right sides together. But what I want to pay particular attention to here is the direction of the angle. So I'm actually going to take my piece and kind of hold it up and make sure I'm going the right way. And then I will use this piece to continue with the other ones. When we're doing these, we are sewing on the line that we've marked. So it's a little bit different than half square triangles. So we'll just continue here. We're sewing on the line. And just super, super simple. Now I'm almost at the end. I'm going to grab my next piece. Whoops, I have my line going the wrong direction. So what I need to do is to make sure that I have this turned the right way once again. And what this is on Unit A, we are going from the upper left corner to the bottom right. So all of these, so just make sure that we're doing it the same way every time. Now on our next Unit B's, it's going to be different, so we'll have to pay extra close attention to that. We are chain piecing these, which I think is so super, super helpful and fast. And I've got this nifty little gadget here. This is our thread cutter that we have, and you know these are online, they're super cool. All you have to do when you chain piece, just grab your pieces, go just like this, and it is so fast. So this is such a handy thing to keep next to your sewing machine, because if you chain piece like I do, this is gonna make it go lots faster. All right, now I'm gonna continue to sew my Unit A pieces together, double checking the direction of my mark on my pieces, and we're gonna get these all fixed up and done. Okay, so I have a few of my Unit A's already sewn here. I'm going to show you how to cut them. I'm going to grab just a small straight edge that has my 1/4 inch marks on it and my rotary cutter, and I'm going to place the 1/4 inch on my line. Now remember, I'm going to pick this up. We're cutting on the outside part, not on the inside part. So 1/4 inch mark of my ruler is on the stitch line. And then I'm going to take my rotary cutter and just trim this off. Now I'm going to continue to do this in the same fashion for all of my Unit A's. Just trimming that up. And I bet you're starting to see why I said that we're gonna make this star without any half square triangles. Isn't this so cool? We're gonna open these up in a minute. We're gonna get these pressed. And usually whenever I press, I really like to press several at once. So I usually kind of lay them out and put them in a line. And as you can see, we're on the wrong side. I take my finger, just kind of give it a quick little open there. We're gonna get them all pressed. I like to give it just a quick press first, and then I go back with my Mary Ellen's Best Press. And guys, this is a must-have tool in my sewing room. It's acting like a starch. It's gonna help stabilize the fabric. It's gonna keep those seams open, and it absolutely doesn't leave residue on my iron. I have really come to depend on it. All right, we've got that Best Press on there. We've given it a nice press. The next thing I usually do is just kind of turn them over here one more time, giving them a nice solid press on the front side. Now here are our completed Unit A's. I'm gonna keep going and get the rest of these made and move to the next step. Now my Unit B's are made very similarly with just a couple of differences. I am using my fabric number 3 instead of my focus fabric and my same fabric number 2 squares. And I am gonna take my rectangle and place my fabric 2 on top. Now, whenever I was doing Unit A's, my direction of my line was like this, so upper left, lower right. But for my Unit B's, I need to change that. It is a different direction. So I'm gonna rotate this so that the line is now from the upper right to the lower left. You see how it goes this way instead. And I'm just gonna lay it over here next to my pattern. That looks exactly the same. And then I'm gonna sew on this line. So we'll start doing that. And one of the things that I really love to do is to keep my pieces next to my machine, so they're super helpful. And another thing I want to kind of throw in and mention here is sometimes you might have a directional fabric that you're using, and we do have a great video for that. So be sure and check it out. We'll pop it up on the screen for you. And this will be really helpful when you're doing half square triangles or the stitch and flip method like this. Now it's time to do our Unit C, and this is where it really starts coming to life. It's going to be so much fun. So according to my instructions, I'm going to start with my Unit B. So I'm going to just shift these up here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to position these on my table the way they need to be sewn together. So I'm looking at the diagram and where's my corner and how does it go and how does it position with my square. So I'm just going to pick these up one at a time, right sides together, and it's going to sew along this edge. Okay, now I have 4 of these done. I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to make this unit, but normally I would continue and make all of my pieces here. So let's get these cut apart. And I do press my seams open. I'm one of those renegade quilters. Okay, so I have all of the step 1 for my Unit C's done here. They're looking really good. And I have my step 2 next to it. Now I consulted my pattern to make sure that I have laid this out the correct way so that whenever I sew them together, they're right. So I'm gonna take my step 1 and then I'm gonna just lay these over, and then I am going to put these together. Okay, so I have 4 of my Unit C's done. I have my chain of goodness here. We're gonna split these up and we will get them pressed. Okay, we have them all pressed. I'm just gonna turn them over and look at them because I like this part. It always makes me feel so excited to see that the block is starting to come together, and I get all of the little pieces, and I'm just gonna turn them so that I can kind of get a feel. Oh, it's gonna be great. I'm so excited. Now remember I mentioned that I was gonna share some other kits and images with you. Let's take a break from our sewing and look at some of those now. So the first one we're gonna see is this gorgeous combination with a pink, an off-white, and a black. And this focus fabric is gorgeous. I love the movement in it. It's got some little splashes of blue and green in the pink, as well as it goes into a little bit of our darker colors. It's really a dark, dark, dark red. But this is gonna be our focus fabric. It is gonna look really great in our star, our half square triangle, and just a little bit on the border. And then our number 2, of course, we need that number 2 to really make it pop. And this is a nice kind of soft off-white with some texture to it. This will be in our background and a little on the border. And then a nice black that also has some texture to it. A little bit of a dot dimply effect on this black that's gonna really contrast with our focus fabric. That is also gonna be in our star and our half square triangle. Now let me just show you an image so that you can see how great this looks. Talk about changing the way a pattern looks. This fabric kit totally changed it from a Christmas to a really fun everyday quilt, and I just love it. All right, let's get you the kit information on this one. It is called a Pop of Pink, and it is in our Yuletide pattern from the Quick Christmas 3-Yard Quilts book. Now our next kit takes it in a whole new color direction and a whole new texture direction. The focus fabric on this kit is beautiful blues and purples and some greens in there. Large print, fabulous. But what's going to happen here when we use this as our focus print, you're going to get a nice peek of it in our half square triangle here. And it's going to really add a lot of texture to our star as well as a little bit on the border. I'm going to show you an image in a minute. You're going to see how amazing it is. Now we have a number 2 that's a little different, and it's going to work because we are very contrasting here, so it's perfect. This is going to go in our background here and a little bit on our border. Same colors as our focus fabric, just a whole lot lighter so that we get that contrast. Then our number 3 fabric is this beautiful blue. It's kind of a little bit more navy. It's going to ground everything. It's going to give us that richness and that yumminess that we're looking for. Now this blue is going to go everywhere the red is. It's also going to go in our half square triangle, so it's going to really give us that elegance that we're looking for. But let me show you the image because, oh wow, it looks so amazing. You know, you see these 3 fabrics and you kind of think in your head, is this going to work? And then you put it in an image like this and you see how absolutely glorious it is. All right, let me get you the kit information on this because this is so, so pretty. It is called Grandiose Garden. This once again is our Yuletide pattern from the book Quick Christmas 3-Yard Quilts. So we have another kit that's done in some blues and some greens, but totally different style. I really love this. It's a little bit more of a modern contemporary print here with some purples, some blues, some greens, and very pretty. It's going to be gorgeous texture in this quilt. Now this is going to go everywhere the black is here on the border and in our half square triangle. And then as the number 2, we kind of have a nice kind of a beige gray. I know that sounds funny. What is that? They always say the greige. I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, but I think it's very warm and it contrasts beautifully with our focus. It's going to go in the background here where you see the off-white and on the border. And then our number 3, once again, is going to give us a lot of grounding, a lot of color yumminess that we need to go with our focus in our number 2. It is going to go everywhere the red is here. It's going to really help that focus fabric pop as well as the number 2, and then it's going to be in our half square triangle. Now this is so, so pretty. Let's check out that image and you can see how it looks so good. This is such a great pattern because this fabric looks fabulous in this pattern as well as the other 2, which is really neat because any 3 yards of fabric work in any 3-yard quilt. So choose your fabric, choose your pattern, and you're good to go. And Yuletide from our brand new book, Quick Christmas, is a really good choice. Now, all of these kits are available on fabriccafe.com. Now, I have even more images, so be sure and stay tuned to the end because we're going to show all of these to you made up in the Yuletide pattern. All right, let's get you the kit information on this one. This kit is called Palette Impressions. And once again, we're using our Yuletide pattern from the Quick Christmas 3-Yard Quilts book. Okay, now I'm ready to put my blocks together. I have consulted the pattern to make sure that I have my unit C's laid out and going the same direction. So I'm going to take 2 unit C's. You see one is turned with my focus on the right side, one is turned with my focus on the upper side, on the top. And I'm just going to put these together, and this is the seam. So I always grab that so I know that's the seam I'm sewing. Now normally whenever I'm doing this, I do not pin these. I just really like to line them up as I go. And I think it works perfectly. When I start matching seams is whenever I really like to pin. Okay, there's my first one. Now you can see we're still going the right direction. I'm gonna fold it over, grab the side that I'm gonna put my seam in. Okay, have those pressed. Now, we are gonna start with the next step, and that is step 2. So I will continue making step 1s, but I'd like to show you the block completed. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to step 2 of our block assembly so you can see how that goes. So I'm gonna take the one that's on top and the one that's on bottom. I'm gonna put them right sides together and grab the side that I need to sew and line them up and get these done. This was my step 2, and this was my step 1. So whenever I put them together, you can see how they're gonna make our star. So now what we're gonna do, once again, I'm gonna lay them out the way they need to go together so that I know in my head that I'm picking them up the right way. I'm gonna fold one over the other. I'm gonna grab that edge that is my seam edge. In this case, I do have a seam that I would like to match, so I'm gonna use a straight pin. Now I'm gonna put this straight through the seam, and it should go through the seam on the other side, and then back through right at the seam. And that's gonna ensure that my seam is matching. Now never, ever, ever run over your straight pins. So one of the things that I do is I like to sew right up to it. And remember, those notches on your foot help you know exactly where you're gonna land. So sewed up to it, pull the straight pin. I will adjust this just ever so slightly, and we will keep going and finishing our block. All right, we are all done. Our block is looking gorgeous. Now we're gonna go press these, and we're gonna do this 11 more times, so we have 12 block A. And now it is time to move on to our block B. Now our block B is just a simple half square triangle. These are super easy to make, but let's step through how I did this. It does say to mark the wrong side of your number 1 fabric. Now in my case, my number 1 fabric really is dark, so the wrong side was a little bit harder to see my mark. I did a test to find out. So whenever I turned my fabric number 3 over, it actually worked better for my mark. So all I did is took my ruler, put it corner to corner, used my water-soluble marker, and did this mark right here. We're gonna start sewing them after all of them are marked. Once again, we're gonna put them right sides together, our squares, and I'm gonna line them up nicely. And then I'm gonna sew a scant 1/4 inch on each side. Now, the first thing I'm gonna do is lower my presser foot. That way I've got it kind of eyeballed in my head where I wanna be. Now on my machine, I know that if I go right on the edge of the 1/4 inch foot, it is perfectly a 1/4 inch. So what I do on my machine is I let my line that I've drawn go right under the edge of the 1/4 inch foot. That's how I know I'm getting a scant 1/4 inch. Now, if you don't know your machine well enough to know right where to do that, do some test blocks. We do some test seams and measure them, and that way you know exactly where it needs to be. Even get some of that tape that you can put on your machine for a scant 1/4 inch, and it'll work perfectly each time. All right, let's get this sewn up. Okay, I have sewn on one side of my line. Now I'm going to turn it around and sew a scant 1/4 inch on the other side of the line. So now it's time to trim. So we're going to get one of these. I'll move that one to the side, and I'm going to get my larger square, and I'm going to cut on the line. So what I'm going to do is just line this up on the line, which is basically corner to corner, which is what we've drawn. And then we're going to cut this. So we've cut on our line, and the next thing I'm going to do is press these. Now, as you can see, we've made 2 half square triangles from every square, which is really cool. I like it that happens. It kind of feels like I'm doing double work all in one step. So I'm going to go ahead and move these over here. We're going to get these pressed open. I love pressing my seams open. I think it keeps everything super nice and flat. When you're trimming a half square triangle, I always utilize my 45-degree line on my ruler. Double check your pattern. So what size am I trimming to? I'm going to put my diagonal line on my seam line, and then check and see where I need to be. All right, and then I'm just gonna trim and trim. And then we always end up with a little pile that I always think a mama bird would love, you know? Wouldn't they just love having all those trimmings for a nest? And it's always so, it feels like such an accomplishment to get done and have all of that. You think, wow, look at all of those that I did. Okay, so I've turned my square. I'm gonna trim the other two sides. Once again, I've lined up my 45-degree line, and then I am going to trim and trim. There we go. We have our first half square triangle. Now I'm gonna continue making these. We need 12 in total, and then we'll go to the next step. It is time to sew our rows together. So the first thing I'm gonna do is consult my layout in my pattern and look at this quilt assembly. Now, one of the things that I always do is I use a sticky note, which is so super helpful to mark my rows. Now, starting with row 1, I will always go in and lay the sticky note right at the bottom of row 1 so that I'm sure that I have everything correct. Now, another thing I do is I lay out my blocks either on my bed, which I use often, or my dining room table. I will go through each row and lay them out so that I know that the orientation is right and I have my rows in order. I've got my row 1 marked, so I'm gonna just shift this over to the side and I'm gonna lay out the 4 blocks for my top row here. So we have a star block, we have a half square triangle block, a star block, and then a half square triangle block. Now, make sure the orientation of your fabric placement on your half square triangles are going the right direction. So this first block here, I have it upside down. So let's turn that so it goes just like this. Focus fabrics on top, then we have a star, and on this one, the number 3 should be on top. So I need to turn that one too. So we'll turn it this way, and now it looks like we're perfect. So I'm gonna pick up the far left block first, and I'm gonna stack them. So this is block number 2, block number 3, and block number 4, so that I know they're in order perfectly. And I have all of my tops at the top, all of my bottoms at the bottom. So then I'm gonna take the first 2 blocks, still consulting my pattern to just verify that I'm going the right direction, side by side, flip them, grab the edge I'm gonna sew. I'm gonna line these up and put them in my machine. Now, what's really cool about this pattern, whenever we're sewing these rows, there are no seams to match. So we're gonna be able to just zip these out in no time at all and keep going. Okay, I have my next 2 blocks, same thing. I know that this is top, this is third. I'm gonna move it over. This is next. This is the seam I need to sew, so I'm grabbing it, and then I will line it up and sew it as well. Have my 2 blocks done. Now this one came out of the machine first, so I know that it's on the far left, and then this is my second one. I'm gonna open these up. I double, triple, quadruple check to make sure I have these going the right way so I don't have to pull them out. Focus here and 3 there, that is correct. I'm gonna fold this over. Okay, I am loving this. This is so great. Isn't it gorgeous? I'm so excited. Okay, I am gonna go take this and press it, and then I'm gonna pick up my row 2 and do the exact same thing, and we're gonna put it all together. And one of the things that I like to do whenever I put my rows together is do 2 at a time, 2 rows at a time. So I sew the top 2, the middle 2, the bottom 2, and then I come back and sew all of that together. It just helps me with the bulk, so I'm not handling all of the bulk throughout the whole process. All right, now as always, I'm gonna fold my top row down to my second. This is the edge I'm sewing, so I'm working with that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the seams only. Now, I like my seams to match up nice and even, and that's why I always pin these. And I always like to go right through the seam line on the top and on the bottom and get them just perfect. And then I'll go all the way across and do the rest. And then I will put it in the machine and sew. Now this is our first 2 rows. Now I'm going to go grab the next 2 rows and then the bottom 2 rows, sew those together, get them pressed, and then sew all those together. Then the only thing we have left to do is the borders. Okay, I love this part of the process because we have all of our blocks sewn together, all of our rows sewed together, and we're ready for our borders. It is so exciting. The quilt is really starting to come to life. Okay, let's talk about borders. So we have 5 of our border strips sewn here. These are our border number 1 strips. And we're going to sew these end to end. I do not trim the selvages off yet. What I do is I put my strips right sides together, and then I sew right here, and I sew a 1/4 inch from this selvage edge. And then I come back and cut all those selvages off. And then I take the strip that's on top, and then I do it with the next one, and I come over here, and I lay this on right sides together, matching up those edges, and then I sew a 1/4 inch from that. Okay, after I have all of my border strips sewn together, I'm gonna take my scissors or my rotary cutter, whatever is handy, and I'm gonna trim off these selvages. I'm also gonna clip these strips apart because they're chain piece and they'll be together there. Then I'm gonna take them to my iron and I'm gonna press those seams open with my Mary Ellen so it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to sew them to the sides of the quilt top. Now, I sew the sides on first, and then I'm going to press it and press the seams open, and then I'm going to go trim those top edges and bottom edges to match so it's nice and clean. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the leftover piece of strip. I'm going to sew it to the top, and I'm going to sew it to the bottom, press those seams open with my Mary Ellens, and then trim even with my sides. You're going to kind of rinse and repeat and do that with your border number 2 strips. Sew them together, press them, sew to sides, sew to top and bottom, all of that good stuff. Now for your binding, you're going to do something very similar. You're going to have strips cut a little bit different width. You're going to sew them end to end, and then you're going to press them to make your binding. Now we get into all of that in detail on our general instructions on page 2 and 3 of our book. Now you saw how easy it was to put the center of our quilt together. And you know, my very favorite part of this is the fact that this is just one little square that you make 4 times and you rotate them around and it comes together so magically. I just love that. And these half square triangles are just super simple. So I really love that. I love how intricate it looks, but it was so simple. Okay, now the next step is going to be putting our borders on. You see we've used our focus fabric, our number 2, and then our number 3 on the binding. Now we have a very in-depth video on how to do your borders and bindings. These are done exactly the same as we always do with 3-yard quilts, and it's very simple. So be sure to check out that video that pops up. Now I've promised you guys some more images, so let's start our slideshow and see all the beautiful fabrics. The first quilt that we have up here, and the color combinations are gorgeous. I love the flower in this quilt in the background with our big half square triangle so you can really see it. It looks like a summer day. I just think it's really, really pretty. Now the next quilt that we have here in this beautiful quilt kit, it is very earthy. It has that black in it again, which I really love for this quilt because it gives it a lot of pop. But those beautiful earth tones and that really fun printed fabric, very, very nice. Then our number 3, let's go red. I love this. Red's a great color. It's so passionate and it looks fabulous in this. I love the batik as our focus fabric. I think it's really pretty and gives us a lot of very interesting texture for this particular quilt. And then we have one called Spiral Bouquet with some real great earth tones. Very nice, a little bit brighter, lighter blue, which I think is perfect for this, with those wonderful kind of medallions that are in the number 1 fabric. It looks so good together, and that gold brings in the sunshine once again. So these are all really, really fabulous quilt kits that are available on Fabric Café. Now don't forget, we always have a limited quantity, so be sure and hop over to Fabric Café quickly. And also, if you really enjoyed the sew along today and seeing all the extra kits and things, be sure to check out the video that pops up next if you would like more. It's Fran Morgan with Fabric Café. Thanks for sewing along with me today.